Review copy provided by Atlus. Clocking in just a bit over 100 hours, I finally put down Star Shatterer on hard mode and witnessed the ending to Metaphor ReFantazio. After that and a good night's sleep, I'm finally ready to talk about this game, and there's so much that can be said. This review will be split into two parts. The first part will be spoiler free with a general summary on what I think about the game, while the second part will dive into some spoilers. Metaphor ReFantazio is a bookend to a decade-long journey from Studio Zero, blending in the best gameplay and design elements of their previous works while pushing the envelope on what fantasy means to them. This game does contain many references to their past works, which are well-meaning and heartfelt, but that makes it so easy to begin comparing Metaphor ReFantazio to those games. Upon introspection, there's a strong feeling that the creators of this title wanted the game to stand on its own 2 feet, to be praised by its own merits. If you didn't know anything about their past works, how would Metaphor ReFantazio hold up? A difficult question for a longtime Persona fan like me. But just as they've pushed past their own comfort zone to deliver us their own takes on a fantasy world, I'd like to do the same. Don't get me wrong, it is very fair to compare the game to their previous titles. However, the creator's intent behind each project could be different. The leniency in the many systems of this game indicates that to me at least. Do I personally jive with it? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But it does communicate a clear intent from the devs on how they want the game to be experienced. And I'd like to keep that in mind for this review. If you disagree or have any strong opinions about this game or my opinions, be it positive or negative, I urge you to leave your thoughts below. Your viewpoints matter. Not only would I love to read those thoughts, but also it will make an amazing resource for people who have never played a game like this before and are on the fence about trying it out. With all of that said, is this game worth the 100 plus hours of your time? Well, it depends. Metaphor ReFantazio is a story-focused, turn-based JRPG through and through. The story itself could be skipped if you're only here for the gameplay, but I really don't recommend you doing that. The game's commentary on the importance of fiction in shaping our reality is relevant, important, and handled with care, even if it may not seem so from the onset. More on this in the spoilers section. Unlike the story, which can be glazed over if you really wanted to, if you have any deep disdain for turn-based combat, this game is straight up not for you. A minor part of the game does involve real-time action, as you can fight enemies in dungeons using real-time combat. However, the system is more so there to streamline grinding as opposed to making it a viable alternative option. Once you have a sufficient level advantage over an enemy, you can one-shot them on the overworld map using this action combat to rack up quite a bit of experience in a short period of time. If the enemy is at your level or higher, they can take a really long time to be put down with this action combat, even though it is possible. If you don't mind or do enjoy turn-based combat, you'll likely enjoy Metaphor ReFantazio's press turn combat system, where both you and the enemy can gain more turns and deny turns through smart usage of the many quirks that the combat system provides. There are several other layers, such as the formation systems and the highly customizable class system called archetypes that, while not complex in their own right, amount to a very enjoyable experience that will keep you on your toes even after 40 plus hours of play, thanks to the way that all these elements stack together to make a wonderful sandwich for you to consume. The pacing between combat and story for the first half of the game is simply amazing. There is a rhythm that you will be taught, so even if this is your first time playing a game like this, it won't barrage you with too much to do, nor will it feel barren. The usual cycle goes as follows. You spend some time getting ready to delve into a dungeon by stocking up on items or improving your combat abilities through growing relationships in the game. Then you spend some time trekking to a dungeon where you go exploring and fighting for quite a bit of time, and by the time you're sick of that combat, that dungeon, and need a change of pace, the story will kick into gear again. Combat-wise, there is a tangible sense of progression in leveling up new archetypes, trying new loadouts, and finding new equipment that can drastically change up the rules of the combat system, which made boss encounters all the more enjoyable as each new challenge presents a new puzzle to solve. 2/3 of the way through the game on hard mode, this combat loop falls into a bit of a repetitive pattern and begins to lose its luster, up until near the very end of the game, that is. A couple of challenging side quests becomes available to you that not only contains a fun story payoff that we'll discuss in the spoiler section, but also teaches you to exploit the combat system to its fullest. So much so that after clearing said side quests, the game, including the amped up achievement version of the final boss, became a bit of a cakewalk for me. There has been quite a bit of discourse on a late game mechanic called Soul Scream, where the enemy will get a ton of extra actions seemingly out of nowhere. It can be quite punishing if you are not prepared, but those who have spent time learning the combat system are given many tools to outright deny the enemy the satisfaction of taking more than 1 or 2 actions per turn. With that said, the combat system itself is not that complex. Sure, there are many systems, but each of those foundational systems are conveyed to the players in an understandable, digestible way. If you give this combat system a chance, you'll feel right at home after some time. There are a ton of strategies in this game you can abuse to outright break the game, and the game even encourages it. The boss wants to nuke you for 9,999 damage? Okay, well, let me reflect that. Oh, the boss absorbs the reflection and heals for 9,999 damage? What if I change their weakness? Wait, I can do that? Bruh. This can be a great thing for those who are more experimental, but a bit of a letdown for those looking for a game that will severely punish them if they don't optimize correctly. Personally, I agree with Metaphor's handling of the combat difficulty. With how customizable the system is, it can be hard to account and balance for every playstyle. They made encounters hard enough to where players have to really engage with the formation and press turn system to survive, but not too difficult where a player wouldn't be pigeonholed into playing in a very specific way. I might care more if this was a competitive multiplayer game, but since it's a single player game, if you want to get that power fantasy, go for it. If you want to make your own difficulty, you can. It's up to you how you want to play. And I think that freedom of choice is more important than making it super duper difficult. Speaking of customizability, this game leans heavily into its class system featuring over 40 unique archetypes, each with its own skills and abilities that you can unlock and inherit over to a different archetype or class. Each archetype belongs in a lineage, or to be more precise, each lineage has 2 to 4 different class advancements. For example, a warrior can advance into a sword master. However, the sword master is not a flat power increase right away compared to the warrior because the skills unlocked from the warrior do not carry over to the sword master unless you use the skill inheritance system. This adds a layer of nuance that I appreciate, where the base version of an archetype can still be just as powerful as an advanced version of an archetype given the right setup. That is, until the very end of the game where you start unlocking absurdly powerful archetypes that you really can't beat. Even so, for the majority of the game, the true power of the archetype system is in its ability to mix and match different skills and abilities to help facilitate how you want to play. So if you enjoy grinding and watching numbers go up, you'll love the archetype system. Each level up into an archetype means one step closer to unlocking very powerful skills or abilities that could contribute to an overpowered build. Also, if you don't enjoy playing as a particular archetype, worry not, this game has an overflow experience system where if you max out an archetype and continue to use them, on a level up you get an EXP item that can be used on any other archetype on any character you want. This system allows you to continue playing to your strengths while bolstering alternative archetypes. If you don't enjoy grinding, however, your experience with the archetype system may not be as positive. Some archetypes are just flat out better than others, so if you picked wrong and don't grind, you're gonna struggle if you spend your time in the wrong archetype. To add salt to the wound, some of the most fun tools will be inaccessible to you. This is especially true near the end of the game, where some of the best archetypes for each character have some pretty steep prerequisites that you have to meet. Pairing up different archetypes together in a squad unlocks different synthesis skills, and I really like this system. Synthesis skills consume multiple turn orders and MP from every single party member involved in that synthesis attack. But because they are more resource intensive, they are obviously stronger, are fun to look at, and also can change the tide of battle in an instant. Depending on how you look at it, this system can force you into a particular party setup or encourage you to try different party compositions. In the early stages of the game, the latter was definitely more of how I felt. I was constantly trying out different party compositions to see how good each synthesis attacks and skills were. As I approached the later parts of the game, however, it felt like the opposite. But fortunately for me, the devs kinda thought about this and added a late game archetype that helped alleviate this pressure. Outside of the archetype system, your party member gains 2 stat points in either strength, magic, endurance, agility, or luck as they level up. For your main character, 1 stat is static and the second stat point you can allocate to your choosing. I honestly love this in games and wish more of your party members could have manual stat allocations as well. It adds to the replayability and really lets you tailor how you want to build your character. Changing archetypes, for example, from warrior to mage, will also modify these base stats to better align with that archetype, so even if your character is not the greatest at magic, they can still be usable with that magic archetype. Annoyingly, the first 3 party members you get skew heavily towards physical based archetypes as opposed to archetypes that scale off of magic. While once again does not hinder your magic based classes too heavily, it could entice certain players to start building the main character as a mage even if they didn't want to play that way starting out. Overall, Metaphor ReFantazio's turn-based combat is one of the most refined and engaging to play in recent memory. In combat, I'm always thinking about managing my turn icons and positioning so I can have an optimal next turn. Outside of combat, I'm constantly thinking about which archetype I want to focus on next and what kind of nutty combinations I can pull off with the many items and equipment that exists for us to play with. On the graphical side, Metaphor ReFantazio is a mixed bag. The snappiness of the menus and the art direction help to elevate an otherwise slow combat system. It is genuinely captivating going through the menus in recent Atlus titles, with this game being the best of the bunch. Even so, some of their environments and characters look very dated. At the very least, this is a pro if you love playing on the go, as it allows the Steam Deck and other handheld PCs to run this game without too much overhead. The key to any good gameplay loop for me, regardless of the genre, is resource management. It is most transparent in turn-based systems just because you can't outskill or reaction time your way out of things, but resource management is very much a key component to other genres like first-person shooters and fighting games as well. From your position on the map, to the amount of meter you have dictating the offensive and defensive options that are available to you, to the usage of time. Regardless of the genre, I find myself more engaged when I have to juggle and manage resources to prevail. Outside of the many resources that you'll be managing in combat, Metaphor ReFantazio will push you to manage your time wisely if you want to succeed with the calendar system. Depending on where you're at in the story, the game will segment you anywhere from a week to a month between each major plot point wherein you must clear a specific dungeon before the deadline. Everything else is technically optional content, meaning if you mismanage your time, you may end up locking yourself out of content. Between the major story beats, you'll be spending a sizable amount of time getting to know the denizens of this world through an activity known as follower hangouts. Building up relationships with these followers not only gives you more story to chew on, but also wide-reaching benefits that range from unlocking new archetypes to eliminating the cost of time from certain activities altogether. For example, the act of cooking usually takes up a time slot. Thanks to leveling up your relationship rank with a follower, you can unlock a perk that makes it so cooking no longer consumes time. So if you did get this follower rank early enough, you'll be able to generate more food dishes and resources with the limited amount of time that you have. Some follower hangouts will be gated by your character's virtue level, a stat that can be built upon through completing quests or spending time during a specific activity. Balancing out your virtue's growths is probably the hardest part for newcomers to this type of game, but Metaphor ReFantazio is pretty lenient with the amount of time it gives the players. So much so that longtime fans of the Persona series have reported reaching the endgame with weeks with nothing to do. This is a net positive for newcomers to calendar-based gameplay, allowing them to experiment with their schedule without inadvertently locking themselves into an unwinnable position. I do have a nitpick about some of these follower hangouts, however, specifically for some of your party members. Companion characters who we can control, like Hulkenberg and Stroll, gain the magical powers of archetypes by going through a change in their psyche. That is to say, from the moment you meet them in story to when they join your party, you witness them go through a dynamic, usually positive character arc. So once you go through that, and then establish rapport with them and begin to strengthen your bonds through these optional follower hangouts, some of the story beats, while offering up tidbits about the characters' backgrounds or quirks, can feel like a retread of the very same story beat that got them into your party. This is not a bad thing per se, as many enjoy spending more time with their favorite characters. For me personally, as much as I liked certain party members, especially the ones that joined later on, I sometimes found myself skimming or outright skipping through chunks of dialogue because of how samey the follower hangouts were when compared to the events leading up to why they joined the party. Fortunately, this does not apply to the non-party followers. The writing for them is great all throughout. Another personal nitpick of mine for the follower rank up systems in Atlus titles is that once you max out a rank with somebody, you don't really spend time with them anymore. This is a gameplay conceit, I get it, but applying actual logic to it can be so sad and also probably send the wrong message by turning the act of building a strong relationship into that of a transactional relationship. Bruh, we're best friends now, so we don't really need to hang out anymore, you know? It's like, our bond's so strong, we don't need to spend more time, ever, so please go away because I'm trying to have an optimal life run, okay? You're ruining my min-maxing. Another thing to note is the lack of agency when it comes to these follower hangouts. During these hangouts, you'll get to choose dialogue options that don't really do anything to make the characters like you more or less. This alleviates a bit of stress from the players, allowing them to actually choose what they want to say versus what they should say. Whether this is good or bad depends on you. Personally, I find that the lack of negative choices is good up until you combine it with the more lenient schedule. The game gives you a lot of room to mess up, but doesn't allow you to mess up at all, so you end up not really needing that extra room anyways. This lack of narrative choice also extends towards the main story. At several points in the game, you'll be given the ability to input how you should approach a given situation. If you didn't pick the right choice, the game will tell you and let you know why you didn't pick the right choice, and then let you choose again, this time eliminating the wrong choice. The linearity is not a problem. I just personally dislike the illusion of choice. Why ask me if my input doesn't matter? From a game design perspective, I kind of get it. It's like a vibe check where you're just making sure that this guy's paying attention. Hey, did you read the last couple sentences? We have a question for you. But sometimes these choices matter. In specific scenarios, your dialogue choices can and will have actual ramifications to which ending you'll get for the game. Yep, this game has multiple endings, and sometimes your choice does matter, but then they don't teach you that. They teach you that your choices don't matter until it do be mattering, so yeah. Nitpicks aside, the game succeeds in what it sets out to do with its narrative and story. Without going into spoilers, the game does a fantastic job at immersing you into the game's world and setting. Character motivations are easy enough to grasp and follow. You can somewhat guess where the story is headed, but not enough to where you'll be able to catch every twist and turn. You'll be introduced to many new terminology specific to the game's world throughout your journey, but it is exposited to you in a timely manner. To the game's credit, you are not beaten over the head with a flood of alien jargon that can leave you confused and frustrated. True to its name, Metaphor ReFantazio does a stellar job at using metaphors to flip fiction and reality. Without diving too deep into spoiler territory, I love the lore of dragons in this game, as it touches upon why dragons have such a profound impact on our society, even though they are just fictional creatures that are used as a representation of something much more personal. The first half of the game is very well paced, with a noticeable slowdown and lull towards the 2/3 mark that actually made it hard for me to pick up and continue the game, all the way up until the final month of the game where the narrative revs up again to a satisfying conclusion. If you have any inkling of interest in this title and don't mind a turn-based combat system, you need to give this game a try. It is not perfect, but oozes passion and creativity, with a strong message in the limitless potential for positive change in our lives if we dare to face and overcome our fears and anxieties. If you are still on the fence, there's a sizable demo that lets you transfer your first 7 hours of play to the main game. There's enough there in the demo that will give you a pretty solid idea on if you'll like the game or not. The game can be punishing, but it is never unfair. With all of that said, I have so many things I still want to talk about regarding the many themes this game tries to tackle, but to do so, I'll have to dive into spoiler territory. If you don't want to be spoiled, come back to this video after you finish playing through the game. Before you click off, however, support your boy by hitting that like button and consider subscribing for more content like this. Thanks. Once again, if you disagree or have any thoughts of your own on the topics that I'll be discussing, please, I urge you to comment below. Your opinions matter, but if you do, please mark spoilers before you get into it so that way people not looking to get spoiled can skip your comment. Spoiler mode activating in 3, 2, 1. Metaphor ReFantazio did not pick an easy topic to talk about. It may be common if you are already fans of Studio Zero, but to the uninitiated, they're gonna be in for quite an eye-opening experience if they choose to accept or consider some of the concepts introduced in this game. It's such a nuanced topic to talk about that I wasn't really sure if I should add this section to the video, but the more I think about it, the more well-equipped I feel to talk about this topic that we're about to discuss. Outside of my 9 to 5 and YouTube, I've been working on a fantasy novel of my own that touches upon a similar topic to this game. Not so much of the socio-political issues that the game brings up, but more so on the core of humanity. On the importance of hope and belief. Admittedly, it is a simple concept, but I've done a lot of research and soul searching to better understand the power and psychology of beliefs so that I may most accurately represent those ideals and differing perspectives with nuance and fairness as it differs from my own belief. I personally walk the path of nihilism. That is to say, I believe that nothing really matters. Yet I don't really feel a sense of despair, as the belief in nothing alleviates any burden of destiny or fate from my shoulders. I am free to decide for myself what is important to me, and that agency is what I believe in. Nothingness is my truth, yet it is just another belief. The main commentary of this game revolves around answering and showcasing how fantasy can have a very real impact on our reality. The fantasy in this context being more than just stories. It encapsulates our ideologies, our deeply held beliefs. Regardless of your personal worldviews or religious inclinations, I think we can all agree that to believe in a god or multiple gods, or no god at all, is to put faith in an unprovable concept. God in the spiritual sense could exist, or just be a fabrication or tool to manipulate an unquestioning audience. Who's to say what the truth of it is with 100% certainty? Can we as humans even comprehend a higher power? In that question, we might have different answers, but nothing with concrete proof. Regardless of whatever path we all choose to walk down, we act in accordance to the fiction that we believe in. In that, there is very real power in fantasy to shape our way of life and the life of those around us. The game is not here to answer the age-old question on the existence of God, even if it feels very heavily skewed towards atheism, especially in the first 30 to 40 hours. This game, upfront, can feel very anti-organized religion. As a God-denying nihilist simp, that messaging affirms a lot of my biases, but to be fair to my God-believing brothers and sisters, the lack of nuanced viewpoints early on didn't sit right with me. 2/3 of the way through the game, we are given a true introduction to the character of Rella, a saint within the Sanctus Church who opposes us, acts as a positive viewpoint on the goodness of organized religion and what it can contribute to society, as she champions the many goods that the church does for people. I felt that this came a bit too late, especially because the first 3 party members that join us all have the same viewpoints that the Sanctus Church is corrupt or bad. I was hoping for a more balanced take early on, where maybe one of the party members we get early on vouches for the church's goodness, even in the face of corruption, and maybe become disillusioned a little bit, to show us, the viewers, how painful it can be to have everything we believe in be all centered around a lie. They tried to do that with Yufa, and even as she grovels about, hey please don't take away my purpose, she still has a really fast character arc, especially if you play it where you go into a dungeon and you clear it that day. So in the span of a couple hours of meeting Yufa, she goes from somebody who believes devoutly in her religion to not believing it at all. While that can happen, it's not common, like not at all. Especially in the age of hyper misinformation. Have you ever experienced somebody in your life that believes in something that is scientifically false and you try to prove it to them and they just kind of ignore it and commit even harder to their beliefs? That is the normal, the average. Being right is so much more important than being correct. And the game does comment about this as well. But before I tangent even harder, let's go back to Rella. Here's the thing. The timing of Rella's importance in the story is intentional. The writers of this game fully understood that the topic of organized religion, in whether it is good, bad, or somewhere in between, is not an easy topic. It is not so black and white. So why then did they wait so long to add nuance to the Sanctus Church? To answer that, I want to quote the main character. It's an optional line that you can pick in a follower hangout. The main character believes that people have a right to believe in any god they choose. I wholeheartedly believe that these are the words of the author and what they were trying to convey with the story of Metaphor ReFantazio. And that was when it hit me. Not every audience playing this game will be at the same page mentally when it comes to these types of topics. For a disgruntled old fart like me who is writing a story of my own, of course these topics are not black and white. For a younger audience who hasn't really stopped to think about philosophy or religion or psychology all that much, they need time and perspective to rationalize the message. Having a clear-cut villain group in the Sanctus Church not only made it easier to follow story-wise, but gives the audience a side to root for. In this viewpoint, we are creating a clear divide between them and us, making things simpler, black and white. The game spends ample time creating this distinction between who we should like and who we don't like, so that they can tear that concept down with the many shades of grey introduced in the later half of the story. What if the bad guy isn't all bad? Maybe it was wrong to just clump every Sanctus Church believer as bad. Maybe there's good people in support of the faith. By taking the slow approach and villainizing the church early, the writers were making a conscious decision to put everybody on the same page. This may bore Atlus veterans, but considering that Metaphor ReFantazio has a much wider audience than the storied franchise under Atlus's belt, I think this approach was the right one. While I still think the game took a little bit too long to add nuanced perspective on the topic of religious institutions, I can at least understand why they chose to wait. But that's just my theory on the way that they wrote the story the way that they did. What do you think about all this? Let me know. On another note, something that didn't sit quite right with me is the entire inciting incident of the story. During the assassination attempt on the prince, the Sanctus Church wanted a stand-in for Louise so they can frame him for the act. The stand-in must be of similar age and be able to use magic. But then, does it really matter if everyone is masked and cloaked? Also, instead of a curse, couldn't they just have stabbed him or shot him with an arrow or something like that? In this context of the cutscene, they definitely could have. The prince was wide open and any of those options would have done the job. So yeah, unless I'm forgetting something, this is just straight up plot armor and not that great writing. They could have just killed the prince but decided not to. It probably would have even been easier to frame Louise by using a physical weapon and then planting that weapon in his quarters or something like that. If there's more context to this, let me know, because after applying a little bit of logic to this, it feels a bit contrived, and that's never a good thing. This contrived incident, however, did create a fun twist with the main character, though I did wish that there were more build-up or foreshadowing before the twist happens. Maybe having Gallica's Dissonance be sprinkled more consistently throughout the entirety of the story may have made the reveal a bit more cathartic and enjoyable. Since I'm nitpicking, I also didn't like how inconsistent the script was in the usage of the term humans and monsters. In this game, contextually, monsters are called humans, yet major characters will say stuff like, "You've turned into a monster," instead of, "You turned into a human." This is another one of those, for the audience, inconsistencies that the writer probably had to implement to make the script not too confusing. And as I say that, I just want to make sure I state this correctly. I'm not glazing this game, I swear. It sounds like it, but I'm just trying to be fair in my complaints. Oftentimes in games, there's just story beats and gameplay that just doesn't mesh together, and you just have to accept it. My personal stance on that is, if it's a story-focused game, then I think that should take precedent over gameplay. So if there are things that don't really make sense in the context of the story, it shouldn't be a gameplay concept. For example, being able to teleport in this game. The party makes it a point to keep this magic of teleportation a secret from the world because it's overpowered and so on and so forth. However, every time you teleport to the main city that you are first introduced to, you park the freaking gauntlet runner in the square. How are you in a town way south of here that's like 4 days away and you just teleport here? Obviously, it's magic. That's, to me, is something that was designed to make the gameplay more lenient, to make traveling not as stressful for players, but it damages that authenticity of like, "Hey man, shush, don't look out the window. We'll be there in a jiffy. It will only take 1 minute to travel back to where we need to." Be consistent with how you're telling your story. Is it important to not let people know you're teleporting or not? Maybe that inconsistency hits me a little bit hard because I am writing my own story, so I tend to notice these things a bit more, but yeah. Nitpicks aside, there are a couple things I really enjoyed with this story. First up is Louise. During the month where we're infiltrating his airship, I felt that the game was committing so many plot holes and cardinal sins that it almost took me out of the game completely. For any of the 4 members holding keycards that we have to beat up and steal the keycards from to not say anything or do anything to us, or to notify any authorities solely based on pride after we cleared that dungeon, especially when they have ample time to do so due to the structure of the game, left me scratching my head. It was a bit infuriating, but then later on, it's revealed that Louis knew the whole time where our party's allegiance lies. While not perfect, Louis is written in such a way where things he does, even if it's suboptimal to his victory or a bit irrational, makes perfect sense because that mofo would definitely do something like that. To craft and write a character that is not only charismatic, but has enough quirks to where a logical, nitpicky person like myself, who's actively hunting for plot holes, can rationalize that, yeah, he really is that type of asshole who would let certain things slide so that way he can just test to see how much stronger he is. And that is quite an accomplishment. All of the things that I was marking down as negatives or plot holes in my notes were suddenly resolved with the reveal of what Louise knew and what he is. To that end, I'm still not sure why Louise has a hard-on for the main character, but I can at least appreciate how he ends up being the foil to the main character in the context of the story. As Heismay points out, both the MC and Louise are victims to tragedy. However, Louise gave in to his anxieties, and we follow the opposite path, those who didn't give in to the anxieties and insecurities. In any kind of story that requires introspection, having a dark mirror is always something that provides more context to those who have not really thought about these concepts too hard. It is a representation of what could be if you were to go down a negative path. Secondly, I am very happy with the lore behind Magla, or magic, in this game. Born from anxiety, magic will always exist. Too much anxiety can warp and distort us, turning us into monsters. To become strong in magic is to learn to control and manage that anxiety. True magic exists in a flux. It is not solely good or evil. This is better represented in the Trials of the Dragon side quest near the end of the game that not only teaches us about the upper limits of the combat system, but also introduces us to the Elegy of the Soul, a super boss born from the anxieties of the masses looking for a savior to help them escape from their problems without doing it themselves. While a bit heavy-handed, the concept that the potential for good cannot exist without the potential for evil is a common but difficult concept to grasp for many. Good without evil simply is. There is no concept of better or worse. No wrongs without rights. As this concept affirms my biases, I always appreciate seeing it in media. With all of that said, the game does a great job at exposing the players to many themes, concepts, and ideas that many probably don't enjoy talking about, or maybe they do but have no one to talk about it with, like me. Often it is nuanced and complex and not so easily digested, but those topics require the most amount of time and differing opinions and perspectives to truly understand. Because the heart of philosophy, or being a philosopher, is not to provide answers to questions, but rather to instill a desire to broaden one's own perspective, which I think this game does pretty well. Not only that, but the game does an amazing job at showcasing just how powerful fiction can be to our reality. Metaphor ReFantazio is a wonderful reminder to how harmful it can be if we let our insecurities and anxieties win. The only way to rise above is to face it head on. While victory may be uncertain, as it can take days, months, or even years. But even in the face of that uncertainty, that triumph will never come if we never take the first step. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you had a great time. To support this channel, hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content like this. With anything in life, it is subject to interpretation, so once again, I urge you to share your thoughts below. As for the fantasy novel I'm writing, if you have any interest in that, I'll leave the mailing list in the description below. I'm not quite ready to unveil it just yet, but believe me, I really want to talk about it. Anyways, if you enjoyed this review, you may also enjoy this other video on screen right now. My name is Varsona, and I'll see you in the next video.